Past. Hello, I'm Mark Turner, your stand-in host for this Garibaldi Red podcast, a Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm coming off the bench late on, Marato style, if you like. And I'm joined by Australia's answer to Awani, our very own Antipodean Dave. How you doing, Dave? Good to see you, mate.
Oh, good. Well, good to see you too, mate. I was hoping that we were going to get your flash introduction for I know what you would have had planned for us for what would have happened if Forest had won. But I don't know. Australians, we don't love draws in sports. And I know Americans don't love draws in sports. And you have tiebreakers and extra time in regular season matches. The famous Australian expression is, draw, it's like you just kissed your sister. You don't know whether you enjoyed it or not. And we kind of enjoyed that, but also we didn't. So I'm looking forward to getting into it. How good was it to just receive that sort of coverage and that sort of activity on your phones as the Nottingham Forest match was going on? And you can't not be proud of the team. They're a good team, Liverpool. So let's get into it as it ends 1-1 Forest and Liverpool.
Fantastic. Well, for those of you, the regular listeners and viewers, wondering where Max is, obviously Dave and I took the executive decision to kick him to the curb after his suggestion that Brian Clough maybe wasn't the greatest Nottingham Forest manager of all time. If Nuno was able to secure Forest's first Premier League championship title, couldn't stand for that, could we, Dave? So we had to bench him for a match.
No, and I hope Max tonight got an appreciation for the Nottingham Forest-Liverpool rivalry that I'm sure you and I lived in the late 70s and the 80s and what we've grown accustomed to. And it was great to have that feeling back of, talk of the cup semi-final matches from the 80s and also the Champions or European Cup match as well from, what was it, 78 or 79. But yeah, sorry, Max, but we might get him in later, Mark. Maybe we let him in.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? It would be certainly nice to speak to somebody who was at the City Ground this evening. We'll come on to the atmosphere that was generated. Phenomenal is a word I'm going to throw out there early doors. But we will get into that in a bit more detail as we make our way through the pod. So as you mentioned, Dave, Forest securing a 1-1 draw against their closest title rivals, Liverpool. And before we get into the game itself, kind of into the minutiae of the goals and kind of how the game developed, Dave, had we said to you at the start of the season, Forest are going to get a win and a draw against Liverpool, most likely you would have expected them to get the win at home and the draw away. But however, Forest to come by those 4 points, would you have taken that?
Oh, you would have taken 2 points out of a possible 6. Liverpool turned up to play this time. They were not getting ambushed and they understood, but we still managed to rattle them early. So if you think about how far we've come, that was a genuine, top of the table clash with ebbs and flows, and halftime really came at the right time for them and the wrong time for us. And perhaps we scored too early, but yeah, how can you not be proud? It's always as emotional at kickoff, just watching the Mull Kintyre and listening to it, wasn't it? Like, did you feel that emotion? Like you could just feel it coming through the television, couldn't you?
Yeah. Again, I want to keep the powder dry a little bit on talking about the City Ground atmosphere, but it permeated the whole event and it made the event, didn't it? So we will certainly circle back to crowd engagement here. I have a couple of observations to make in that regard as well. But yeah, absolutely. Hairs on the back of the neck. I know there are several folks from the Nottingham Forest North American group on our WhatsApp group who actually made it over for the game. I think they flew over literally just to make the match. I don't think it was a work trip they extended. I think it was, hey, we want to be there for this, what could be a historic evening. And they were treated to a really important game and a good result ultimately. And I'm with you. I would have taken the 4 points at the end of the season. If you'd said to fans, we're going to beat Liverpool at the City Ground and we're going to snatch a point on the road, we would have taken that all ends up. So all in all, pretty good. So let's talk about the game in a bit more detail. You referenced the fact that maybe Forest got ahead maybe a little early. I was, screaming the tiles off the roof, as I'm sure you were in your digs, my friend. But then, of course, I looked at the clock and I was like, so much game still to go. It was just 8 minutes when Chris Wood opened the scoring. Fantastic work in midfield by Callum Hudson-Odoi. releasing the ball to Alanga, who perhaps didn't put it exactly where Wood wanted it initially, but Wood checked his run and Alanga found him on a second glance. And then first time dispatch with his less favoured left foot. What were your thoughts on that goal, Dave?
Well, I think it was really the first time we touched the ball with any promise. And so my father doesn't get to watch too many matches live with me. And he was remarking, he said to me, "Oh, Dave, they haven't touched the ball." And so then the minute I said to Dad, I said, "Yeah, you watch this. When we get the ball, we break fast if the opportunity is on." And it really was a Nottingham Forest 24-25 goal that exemplified really how we play. And what a well taken finish from Chris Wood. He's expected goals from chances. It just continues to be really high, and it's not an easy finish. That's maybe as good a goal as Chris Wood scores. He's quite wide. He's got it. It was 2-on-4. I was really pleased, and half of the mid coast of New South Wales up here at Port Macquarie, where I'm holidaying with my family, was woken up. No noise complaints. I'm normally in Sydney watching, so thankfully the people of Sydney were excused this time. But then you think, and I can see in the comments, Phil B, he's had a couple of good comments. Was it Murado time after 9 minutes? You're right, Mark. You're thinking, can we hold on for 81 minutes? And it's a tall order, but what a finish. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually made the very same comment in the WhatsApp group over here. I'm like, right, let's get Murato on then. But obviously that was too early. Although I do want to make an observation about the subs. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Speculating about whether or not they came on a little too late. In fact, comments are starting to stack up some great ones in here, and we'll circle back to those in just a moment. So if you're watching us live, please drop your comments in, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. You've touched there on Chris Wood, who did have a fantastic game, and I was so impressed with his hold-up play and with his movement. And you're right, he's living off scraps oftentimes. This counter-attacking football that Forest have, it does mean he has to take his chances. And I'm just grateful. He seems to be the antithesis of, and your memory will go back this far, of like an Andy Cole, who used to need 10 chances to get 2 goals. Chris Woods is kind of the opposite. The opposite of that. And thank you.
Mean 20 chances. 20 chances to get 2 goals. Goodness me, if Andy Cole doesn't play for Manchester United and Newcastle, does he have the career that he has? I'm guessing probably not.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But so a fresh Chris Wood laid on for that Anthony Alanga cross that Jota Silva wasn't on the end of. Boy, just his positioning and the way he seems to have this way of just the physicality getting free from the opposition defenders, which is really difficult to do at the Premier League standard. And you can see, Virgil van Dijk and Kanate, like these have got quality. Like they're basically as good as it gets. And Chris Wood gave him a run and scores on them after 7 minutes. And the remark in commentary that really I felt Forest rattled Liverpool early on. And you could see a few of them arguing with each other, and we really got at them and got under their skin. And it was, some classic S-houchery by the Forest fans as well, and also by the players that really got under their skin. And I thought, I had this saying, which sometimes is halftime didn't favour Forest. We would have been better off to have no halftime and have the match keep playing. But we that first half, it was really classic football. Game of 2 halves.
Absolutely. And again, we're going to circle back to the comments here in a moment and ask producer Dan just to throw a few up so we can kind of hone in on them. But I do want to just zoom in on one very, very quickly, because I've noticed here a comment from Tara, who's actually at the game. So if we go ahead and throw that out, that'd be great. She says, just back from the game, what an incredible atmosphere tonight. Was in the lower Trent end. She was in the lower Trent end when Wood hit the back of the net. Oh, wow. A lot of emotion. Few people had tears in their eyes. Yeah, over here too. Another fantastic performance from Forest. Tara, you don't know how lucky you are. What a wonderful night to be at the City Ground. And we touched on the atmosphere a couple of times, Dave, and you were talking a little bit about some of the Forest chants there. I referenced one earlier. I want to circle back to it. Arne Slot getting rattled early doors. I mean, obviously that goal after 8 minutes, I'm sure did nothing for his disposition. But then you could hear the Forest fans, and I believe, and maybe Tara or anyone else who was at the game can confirm this, I believe they were singing to the tune of the legendary Cranberry song "Zombie."
Yep.
In your head, Arnie.
In your
Arnie.
head. In your head. I'll sing it for you. Arnie, Arnie, Arnie.
So good. So good. I was laughing so hard at that. It was magnificent. But Forest did go toe-to-toe with Liverpool in that first half. To your point, we didn't look overawed. I mean, the game looked pretty tight up until Forest scored, and then both teams were trading blows there for a while. There's no doubt that Liverpool got a real grip on the game in the second half, and we'll come on to that in just a moment. But let's hone in on a couple of performances. We talked about Chris Wood. I want to spend a little bit of time in midfield as well, focusing on Morgan Gibbs-White. I thought all of the Forest midfield played well this evening. Anderson put in another great shift. Obviously, I'm a big fan of his. But I feel like Morgan Gibbs-White was the most complete and best performing midfielder in the center of the park for either team this evening. Just the battling performance again, the control under pressure. Some of the passes he splayed around the field were ridiculous. Another great performance from Forest's kind of jewel in the crown. Do you agree with that?
Maybe not as complimentary. I thought maybe I'm 85% of your compliments toward Morgan Gibbs-White. I think what part of the reason for that is the difficulty of the opposition. So you comment in terms of him playing well. Well, yeah, he did play well, but he's playing against a world-class midfield. And so that's as good as he can possibly look against a world-class team. The chances that he are going to get, those normal kind of turns and flicks and passes, Alexander-Arnold and Van Dijk, these guys are better at closing those off, and you saw that kind of happen a few times.
Yeah.
I thought the yellow card was a little petulant, and then he went into his shell a little bit once that happened. I thought, I don't like players on yellow.
I don't like seeing players doing the yellow card thing. I despise that. But by the same token, he was fouled, and
I thought that was a bit tough. I thought it was a bit tough on him too, wasn't it? Like. It was undeserved, and I think the referee misunderstood the emotion of the match and what was this. Like, it was a first versus second match. It was Nottingham Forest coming back, into the big time and really announcing themselves in that position and being 1-0 up. And by yellow carding a player for that, I think I don't think that was I just don't think it was necessary. And then as a result, Morgan has to be a little bit more careful with his tackles, which does hurt us a little bit because he's so good and underrated at his ball winning. Like, he's not just a creative midfield player. He's an inspirational ball winner, and that's what makes him such a complete player and why he gets picked for England squads and whatnot. But also Liverpool have to play a little bit differently because of his creativity. So, but I thought Elliot Anderson had it, Mark. I thought the touch of Anderson is such a big difference. I can't believe you're jumping off the bandwagon of team captain of Elliot Anderson. I'm going to take your hat and put it on.
I'm not at all. In fact, the one thing I thought Anderson offensively wasn't as imposing today, and I think that's for all of the reasons that you just covered in terms of the quality of the opposition. However, his work rate getting back, it was tireless. Him and Morgan Gibbs-White, but he definitely put a shift in. And had another great performance. And I don't think, again, he imposed himself on the match maybe as much as he has in other matches, but you have to take the opposition into consideration in situations like that. And remember, he's still a young player with very few minutes under his belt. He didn't play a ton for Newcastle, wasn't really expected to be a starter for Forest, and now he's almost undroppable. And again, another solid performance.
He's not almost undroppable. He is out and out undroppable. He's a big part of it.
Yeah. I wouldn't drop him, but I'm hosting tonight, Dave, so I have to kind of sit on the fence.
Okay, sorry.
I'm not entitled to an opinion this evening, Dave.
So now I can take all of my strong opinions and then use your same opinions, and then we've got 178% worth of strong opinions. And what did you make of playing Ryan Yates after playing him in the cup match? Do you think Nuno changed his mind on that front in that Yates played himself into the... Because it just seemed an odd choice. If you're going to play Yates, why didn't he play Dominguez? What?
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know what happens at training. We don't know, in terms of fitness and where people are on the red line and all that kind of thing. And so that's impossible to say. But I was delighted to see Yates start tonight regardless.
So was I.
Before we transition to the second half, let's ask producer Dan, just to keep us on our toes here and throw up a few of the comments. And I think we might be having somebody else, a special guest, being parachuted in to join us. But let's hone in on a few of the comments. So, producer Dan, feel free to throw up whatever catches your eye. And
what a new Forest fan, Mark.
There we go. Ian Clark, once again, a fantastic display of leadership from every player. I like the use of the word leadership there, Ian. Good observation. Precise, committed, and incredible energy throughout. Any opposition is going to have to play so well to beat us this season. Yeah, can't argue with that. Phil B says, shows how far we've come, that I actually felt a bit disappointed though we didn't win against the league leaders. Yeah, absolutely, Phil. I think Dave and I are in the same boat. And I'll take one more here from Jam0119. An absolutely fantastic performance to get a point from the best side in Europe at the moment. Yeah, Liverpool have to be happy. They got a point out of us. That's what you mean, right?
I knew you were going to work that joke. As soon as I saw that coming, he's going to work that joke.
Murillo is the best centre-back this club has ever had. Well, Des Walker might have something to say about that, not least of all as well, the European Cup winners. Okay, lost the rest of the comment, but that's okay. I think we get the gist, and we again
just like Murillo loses the attacker's mark when he retrieves the ball and he scrambled. So just on that clearance that he had in that first half, where Liverpool broke quickly and he stretched that. Oh, that was such like his reading and also his speed and his scramble. I don't know what it is. He just always looks like he's like kind of sloppily standing and like exhausted and knackered, but he's just so fast and so.
And after watching the Supercopa this weekend and being a Real Madrid fan, well, I say fan, I'm a Forest fan. I'm a Real Madrid sympathizer. You can only have one team, but I take interest in them. But after seeing their horrendous defensive display against Barcelona in that final, Trent Alexander-Arnold is not the answer, but more and more I think Murillo might be. He would look good in all white, but I'd hate to see him leave the City ground, that's for sure. But keep the comments coming. And then producer Dave, I think, do we have somebody parachuting in here mid-pod to join us?
There we go. Oh no, I'm not. Oh, I am here.
You've been banished.
I've just been banished and then re-added. We're on
great traitor style after your Brian Clough comments in the last podcast.
We're just on the M1. Thanks for stepping in, Mark. I've got no voice. Yeah, what a game! First of all, I just thought that was a great game. If you're a neutral watching on the telly, you must have really enjoyed that. And you know what? It's funny. You were just on about that comment from that guy that said it's weird as Forest fans that we feel like we're a little bit disappointed we didn't win that. To say that, you know, they're probably the best team in Europe right now in terms of form and everything like that. We're disappointed that we've not beaten them, and that's how far not only the team but I think the club has come. It was a very, very special night at the City ground. Not to rub it in, of course, both.
Well, you actually, thank you for joining us, Max. Yeah, it's great to see you. I'm glad you could join us. And actually, you're transitioning us nicely into talking about the City ground atmosphere. Dave referenced it a couple of times, and I'm kind of tugging the reins a little bit. But let's get into that. I mean, obviously, Dave and I didn't have the opportunity you had this evening there to be there at the City ground for this historic head-to-head. So talk a little bit more, if you would, about what the atmosphere was like in the stadium. It just seemed incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just saying to our good friend Pat, who is driving us nicely right back up to Manchester.
Hey, Pat.
So, yeah, I was just saying to him, actually, it felt like that, in a weird way, it felt like Forest were a team in the Championship playing Liverpool in the FA Cup. And it almost had that special feeling. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, of course, to the club, because we're a Premier League side now, but I mean it in a way of the atmosphere was special. Everything just felt right tonight. Before the ground, you're walking round, you can almost smell it. It just gave me similar vibes to the games of Sheffield United in the playoffs. And I look back probably to last season and obviously the Chelsea game and then the Arsenal game, the first season when Forest stayed up with that Taiwo Awoniyi goal. It just reminded me of that. It was almost just a trademark City ground atmosphere, and everyone was just loving it. And to get the goal very early on, we looked nervy, to be perfectly honest. I thought we started the game and I didn't think we started the best at all. We looked nervy, but then that was just typical Forest, right? One chance, one goal. Chris Wood's there, a nice ball into him, and look, he scores, sends everyone into absolute pandemonium, and if Murillo scores that absolute screamer, then I think we could have been talking about a different result. But yeah, overall, brilliant atmosphere, boys. Great result.
Dave?
Oh, I was just going to ask you before, Max, where does that match compare from the matches that you've been to in your short time? Is it as good as the playoff win? I guess it's got to be up there, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think in terms of the atmosphere, it was probably up there with Sheffield United, especially that second leg. And it probably had similar moments to it. You look at the likes of Bryce Samba keeping Forest practically in that game, practically winning Forest that game and getting us to Wembley and ultimately getting us promoted. And I think Matt Sells did the same tonight. I know we're drifting away from the atmosphere chat, but we've talked many times on the podcast here, haven't I? And I've asked you guys about Matt Sells and even 6 months ago whether Forest should have upgraded again on a different keeper. But I think, any doubters have been completely proven wrong. To keep Forest in the game like that, unbelievable saves. And I think what's key is defensively, Forest is so hard to break down at the minute. I genuinely think any team coming to the City Ground or Forest going away from home, you just feel like we're not going to concede many. And to say we've only conceded one against, again, the best team in Europe from a corner,
not even open play,
as Pat says, it was brilliant. What did you think of the game, Pat? Overall thoughts?
Incredibly entertaining, nerve-wracking, because if you think if we do turn Liverpool over and we get the win, we're in the conversation for a title race. But if you would have said before I actually did say I thought it'd be 2-2. That was my prediction before the game. But to say we were second in the league, we've taken 4 points from Liverpool. If you would have said that before today's game, I would have said, please, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that we're not out of it yet. Teams have dropped points around us. And yes, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But if Arsenal drop points against Spurs, it's a difficult game. It's a derby. Form goes out the window. Forest don't have an easy task against Southampton. I'm not going to say that, but it's certainly a winnable task. And I don't fear that game at all. And if we win that, and again, Liverpool drop points in the next coming games, then we're still in with a shout. And I think anybody that writes us off and anybody that says, Forest won't win the league or have 0% chance, there is that feeling there. And the atmosphere replicated that feeling. I just think there's real belief. There's just real energy around the place that we can do something special, whether that be mount a title push or whether that be finish in the top 4 or 5 of the Premier League.
What was that podcaster from United years ago? Was it Andy saying?
Yeah.
Second half of the season, we're doing a title charge.
You're
and
right.
I think it's coming. I think Southampton. I've got a feeling we might score a couple on Sunday against Southampton. Arsenal have got a tough game against Spurs tomorrow. Liverpool will drop points between now and the end of the season. Big games, and I think it's all to play for.
Absolutely.
So, Max, what you experienced tonight? Go on, Dave. Please go on.
I was going to say, Mark, what was the reaction after the goal that Liverpool scored? Because I feel Forest fans, speaking of the atmosphere, I feel the Australian alert, the football intellect of Forest fans is very high. And so I feel the Forest fans just know the chance to come out with, and, like going up with the Cranberries aren't a in your head chant. What was the reaction? How did the Forest fans do as the 12th man?
Yeah, absolutely. But also,
yeah, that must have been hilarious.
Yeah, and for that chant to be created live
on the spot
yeah, with no practice, and pretty much all 4 sides of the ground singing it, bar the Liverpool fans behind the goal. It was just and I think it just shows that Forest fans are almost enjoying the journey at the minute, and there doesn't feel. Of course, we wanted to win tonight, but you go into games now, you don't feel pressure as such. And obviously, as we get towards the tail end of the season, and there will be games to play where Forest could win to secure a European place or secure a Champions League football. Yes, we'll probably get a bit nervy then, because that's football. That's the way the game is. But when you think back to last season or the season before, we were going into games thinking we have to win this, because if not, we're probably going to get relegated. And you remember the Luton away game, and you remember, I try and think, the Chelsea at home. You remember games like Southampton, Brighton in the first season. Remember that Danilo goal that kind of secured that win? I think it was over Southampton. So we were going into games and you're feeling nervous, you can't relax, whereas the atmosphere's not relaxed, but you have that sense of, actually, the pressure's on Liverpool, the pressure's on other teams. And if Forest slipped up now and lost the next 10, yes, it would be disappointing because we don't want that to happen. It wouldn't be a disaster though, would it?
So David mentioned earlier the rivalry between Forest and Liverpool, and of course he and I and the other Dave have alluded to that on a number of occasions because it's what we came up with. We always feel like maybe you don't quite get that connection, and all, you know, we expect you to, because for much of your fandom, you know, Forest have been languishing somewhere other than the Premier League. So do you feel like that was a really special night tonight, Max? Did you get a sense of that rivalry between Forest and Liverpool? I mean, my first ever season of supporting Forest, not to age myself here, but I'm about to, was a year that Forest went toe-to-toe with Liverpool when they were back in the old First Division. To secure their place then in Europe, and of course everything marvelous that followed. So for me, like that rivalry with Liverpool is very tangible, and I love it. Did you get a sense of that tonight? Did you get a sense of why it was a really special night for so many Forest fans?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can talk about, you know, we talk about tactics and how well Forest have done defensively and how well we've done scoring goals and the key players. But one thing that I think in football is almost the feeling around the ground. And obviously, as mentioned earlier, and it will continue, because when you look back in the last 23 years we were out the Premier League, it was looking forward, you know, you'd open the fixture list come August when they were released, and you'd be looking at Derby, and you'd be looking at maybe Leeds and maybe
Sheffield United,
exactly. Yeah. Now, for Forest to be looking now when we probably open the Premier League hopefully next season, and maybe the Champions League ones too, but you just have that sense of you're in and amongst the big boys now. You're in amongst the top six, and I just think that's the feeling. It's like, you know, Liverpool fans singing "We hate Nottingham Forest." Who'd have thought that a couple of seasons ago?
Well, that chant, I've not heard that. I'm sure you guys have heard it, that "We hate Nottingham Forest, we hate Everton, we hate Man United, Liverpool, we love you." I've not heard that for many years. And there was sort of a nostalgia surrounding that. But it really feels nice to be, we've now got a seat and we're eating dinner at the top table. And that feels good.
Absolutely. And also, boys, we will leave in a minute because I don't want to take over the podcast. But and also, you know, we need to get backstage midnight arrival.
Yeah, guests who take over the podcast, Max, are annoying, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, try hosting one when the guests
take over the podcast.
You'll get your chance eventually, Dave.
Hey, Max, who was your man of the match? Who stood out?
Well, yeah.
Who stood out at the actual match? Who stood out on the field watching live?
Man of the match, obviously, you know, mentioned to Chris Ward, great goal, composure, did well. But I think the man of the match for me has to be Murillo. And I think obviously he made a few maybe silly errors, skewed passes, as Murillo does, and he switches off for those silly moments sometimes. But with that, you get the unbelievable skill, you get the talent, you have a top of the league, in my opinion, defender there. And you have a player that will go on to achieve great things, hopefully with Forest. But if not, he will be a top European footballer. You watch the way he plays tonight, and he was just composed every single time he made. It's very foggy on the road actually, so we must be careful. But he made some just unbelievable challenges. Decision making was excellent, I thought, from him tonight. Timing was spot on, and I think another player to give a mention, and he might go under the radar, he might not, but Elliot Anderson, I thought, had another brilliant game, just to almost break up the midfield. Ryan Yates had a good game, but Yatesy does what Yatesy does, and he was brought in today. Dave, you might disagree, but he was brought in today to do a job, and that was to break up the play in transition and disrupt it, and he won Forest many fouls. I thought the ref didn't give us much. Don't like to, you know, moan too much, but Chris Cavalier, I thought in the ground, I don't know what you guys thought on the telly, but I thought refereeing wise, I just thought he lost control of the game at times.
Anything else, Max? We have another couple of hours to fill.
No, and that's everything from me. So I'll let you boys crack on. We're going to stop at the services in a minute. Thanks for stepping in, Mark. Really appreciate it. Cheers for coming on, Dave. I'll see you all next when we're next doing one. And yeah, great result. Yes! You Reds.
Cheers, Pat. Cheers, Max.
On you Reds. See you soon. Take care, guys.
Fantastic. Excellent. Yeah, mate. It's good. I'm glad you made that
kick
comment.
him off, Mark, just because I was worried he was going to crash.
I mean, all the criticism he gives us about rambling. Blimey. All right. Well, let's transition back to a couple of the comments we've been getting in, and then we'll just talk a little bit about the second half. And I'm sure producer Dave wants to go to bed as well, so we'll wrap this up. But it has been such a significant night for Nottingham Forest, going toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in the world, and securing a point in a historic 1-1 draw at the City Ground. Let's look at that comment, if we could, from Ian Clark. So does tonight highlight the need for another striker? If we had a more prolific striker option on the bench, I think Nuno would have made an earlier sub. Bringing on Taiwo late seemed a little like a token gesture. Dave? Thanks, Ian, by the way.
I thought that subs were very interesting. I thought the subs were interesting tonight in that it's almost felt like he had his strongest 11 and he kept the strongest 11 on for longer than he might have wanted to normally. And so I thought it was Taiwo time a little earlier than perhaps he went for. And maybe I'm still got my Taiwo goggles on, a feeling that, it's Taiwo from 2 seasons ago against Liverpool and he's going to really want to score. And Pete Taiwo would have been very helpful in that match at the end, given that Chris Wood was feeding on scraps and Taiwo is such a good striker at feeding on scraps. The problem is for us attracting a striker, are we bringing in someone to go ahead of Chris Wood, which is difficult to displace him after the performances that he's been putting in. And so then are you putting a striker that's in between Taiwo and Chris Wood? And so that makes us not a very attractive option as a club. So we're really going to attract a striker that's going to be better than Taiwo anyway, unless you think, well, can we, a striker's going to back themselves to beat out Chris Wood, or maybe we get in a younger striker who's, much like the quarterback, sitting in behind, the established veteran, and a striker who comes in behind Chris Wood, who learns the trade, from Chris Wood, who's been in the Premier League for a very long time.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen Taiwo earlier and peak Taiwo and that Alanga cross. Oh, just a fresher Chris Wood was on the end of that. Or, I thought Jota wasn't in the quite right spot on that one. So do we need a striker? Seems to be the one we're leaning to in terms of what we need.
Yeah, and I think it's the wild pendulum swing that I think has put us in this predicament. We've gone from really scrapping at the bottom of the division for 2 seasons to now being at the heady heights of second and not kind of matriculating through the league in the process. It's just been a sweep from one end to the other. And it's sort of taken us from a position of who's going to want to come play for us because we're scrapping against relegation to, now we have probably a lot of strikers that are interested in Nottingham Forest now, but are they prepared to come in as backups? And it feels to me, it's almost akin to the situation that Tottenham had for many years with Harry Kane. It's like Harry Kane is clearly the number one and he's going to start most games and play most minutes. Who wants to come be an understudy, despite the fact that Tottenham are at, the top end of the league? They might make the Champions League every now and then, and they're an attractive proposition, but do you really want to go sit on the bench? And that's kind of where we find ourselves a little bit now. So, but I have confidence in our recruitment team to crack that code, if not this January, then in the summer. We'll circle back to the comments here in a minute, but we have a game to talk about. So despite the fact that Max covered so much of it, I do want to get your take, Dave, particularly on the second half. I mentioned earlier that there's no doubt that Liverpool wrestled control of that match. Although they were frustrated. I was joking with folks on WhatsApp. I'm like, do you think Liverpool might sub on Mo Salah at some point? Joking about the fact that once Nico Williams settled down, so I think he had a bit of a nervy start. He was robust, man. And he had Salah by and large in his back pocket and did a wonderful job of keeping him quiet. Of course, then subs came on the 65th minute. And within 22 seconds, they combined Tsimikas putting in a decent corner for Jota to nod home from close range, rather frustratingly getting in between Murillo and Wood, 2 of our larger players and 2 players you'd argue are probably are most comfortable in the air as well. So a little frustrating to see that. It's interesting, Dave. There's a common wisdom, isn't there, that you should never sub on players at a corner if you're the team defending the corner, but rarely do people talk about whether you should sub on players when you're attacking a corner. And more, I feel like that's a good idea. If you're the attacking team, definitely sub on players at a corner, because oftentimes teams aren't going to pick those players up or maybe be as ready to do so. So what was your take on that goal, Dave? And do you feel like that was good Liverpool strategy there or just bad Forest defending?
Well, it just seemed to switch off for a couple of seconds, didn't they? When the Liverpool guys came on, and just it was a pinpoint corner that just happened to beat the defense of Milenkovic. I have from my and to get past. I think we could consider ourselves very unlucky to have conceded that goal. Ourselves came out and flapped at it and didn't really cover himself in glory in that moment, but boy, he made up for it later. The chances that Liverpool had, there was the Aina clearance off the line. There were various other moments that looked pretty hairy as best as we could, and boy, it was a nervous last couple of minutes, but they're really coming for us. We needed the extra 3 subs. I was really worried at the end, Mark.
Do you think there was perhaps a foul on Matt Salles on that corner? There were some folks suggesting online that he was being held or blocked out, or did you not really? You feel it was just going to general rough and tumble from a corner, and Forest, just like you said, switched off? Do we lose you there, Dave? Dave, you there? We already lost Max. Don't make me do this on my own.
I'm having a little bit of trouble with my internet speed here, Mark. You might be flying solo for a minute. I think you're going to be doing this on your own for a minute.
Well, that's okay. We're running long on time anyway, so I'm going to try and land this plane, and then Dave can rejoin us.
Over to you, Mark.
Well, as Dave mentioned, Liverpool really did get a grip of the second half, and particularly the second half of the second half. Those of you in the know will get this reference. I think we were all in the vomitorium after Liverpool equalised. In fact, they had 23 shots to Forest's 6 and dominated possession with over 70% across the span of the match. So there's no getting away from the fact that Forest were under the cosh, but a combination of Matt Salles' brilliance, 3 fantastic saves, Milenkovic, Murillo, the aforementioned Williams, and also Aina, as Dave mentioned, clearing off a line, kept Forest in it. I was going to discuss with Dave the lateness of the subs. Forest made a sub kind of around what you'd expect to be the normal time, I guess, when Dominguez came on for Ryan Yates, who was on a yellow card. But then Forest didn't sub again until the 88th minute. Those subs at least got 8 or 9 minutes in their legs with the 7 minutes of extra time that were added. But it did seem to me like we could have seen fresh legs earlier in the match. Nevertheless, Forest were able to hold on and secure that second spot over halfway through the season. And Forest are 6 points clear of 5th place. 5th place might be good enough for Europe, but we know that the top 4 is for sure. And right now, Forest have 6 points worth of daylight between themselves and that 5th spot. As Max has already left and Dave continues to struggle with his tech issues over there, I'm going to bring this episode to a close.
You can see me, Mark, or am I completely gone?
I can see you still.
We're going to bring this. That was such a good couple of minutes from you, but yeah, I'll just wrap it up. I just thought,
go on,
have
please.
You got me?
Yep, I do. Go.
I just thought that was such a good cover up, and I think you maybe didn't give enough credit to Nico Williams with how he contained Mo Salah. Actually, I think he's one of the key moments from the match. Actually, I thought that was a terrific thing, and for my man of the match was Sells. I thought he saved despite the goal that he let in. I thought he some of his saves were absolutely terrific and kept us in it. And it's been a couple of matches in a row where he's really been the key player on the field. And if you're going to push for titles or Champions League spots, then you're going to need your goalkeeper to go and do that. And you're also going to need your podcast host to step up where other players and other podcast guests go missing, which you just did brilliantly.
Good wrap up. Well, I want to bring the podcast home on a final comment. I do like Anthony's comment suggesting that Van Dijk is worth 80 million. So what on earth is Murillo worth? But Anthony's earlier comment is one I'd love to bring up, producer Dan, if you wouldn't mind, where he says, whatever happens from here on, it's been a fantastic and memorable season. I honestly never thought they'd ever get back to the Prem at times. I'm just enjoying not having to stress about relegation. Anthony, couldn't have said it better, my friend. Diego Jota at the end of the match suggested that Liverpool should have won. He himself should have scored additional goals. But, beating Nottingham Forest is not for everyone. And it certainly isn't for Liverpool this season. Forest in second, still hot on Liverpool's heels. Come on, you Reds.